It's important, Director, to hear the President's vision and priorities for resourcing the people's government to provide for the common defense. It's important to hear about the President's vision and priorities for stewarding the people's treasure to promote the general welfare of the public. And it's important to hear the President's vision and priority for resourcing the government to protect and preserve our children's futures and to secure the blessings of liberty for the next generation. That's why I think this is the most important committee in the United States Congress, Russ. And that's why meetings like today and discussions and debates like today, I think, are paramount for the governing of our great nation. With that, I'm just going to jump into yielding myself such time as I may desire. Okay, no notes here, just some thoughts. We've done well to have some constructive conversation and have civil tone. Today, I suspect, will be a little more amped up. And I'm pretty amped up myself. I hope we hear honest, constructive comments and good faith debate, but I suspect we're going to hear some spin. I anticipate we'll hear some false narratives and fear-mongering, conjecture, and even flat-out misrepresentations of the truth. That's what I expect, sadly. I hope that didn't happen. But what I think is important, Director and colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, is that we put out what I believe is factual context to this conversation. Russ, I don't know of a president in my lifetime, maybe in history, but in my lifetime, that has inherited such a complete and utter mess as President Trump did in January of last year. One self-inflicted disaster after another for 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration. Utter lawlessness, incompetence, a border that was wide open, millions of people, criminals, gangs, drugs that killed a plane load of Americans effectively every week, more people dying of the drugs coming across the border than the people dying from the Vietnam War. Again, all because of the dereliction of duty to uphold the laws of this land and a failure to do the first and most important job, which is to provide for the common defense. And the American people suffered. Our resources were drained, our safety was jeopardized, and there was no rule of law, the cornerstone of any civil society. We had feckless foreign policy. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was a dumpster fire. We didn't do anything to preempt or prevent Vladimir Putin from invading Ukraine. We were spending our time at the Pentagon teaching our troops a master class in pronouns in the era of transgenderism, and we were socializing our troops in radical ideology instead of preparing them to fight and win wars and to restrain evil. And the result was we had a much more unstable world. I think we were made a mockery by our enemies. And finally, we saw unbridled spending, about $7 to $8 trillion, record deficit spending. If you add in the additional cost of interest that went skyrocketing, it's about $12 trillion overall. We had a weaker economy, recessionary economy. We had a cost of living crisis that we haven't experienced as a nation in almost a half a century. We were paying people not to work. The failed policies and the spending that created this unaffordability crisis was that we were paying people not to work. Let's remember this. We were bailing out union pension funds without fixing it, bailing out schools that didn't open for our children. We waived work requirements for able-bodied adults in every welfare program, while we allowed tens of billions of dollars to be drained from these important social programs for our citizens by illegal immigrants in this country, millions of them. The list goes on. We taxed and regulated our job creators. And again, the most regressive tax in my lifetime was the 20+% increase in prices for working families. Trump comes in, you and the team, in 1 year, secure the border, stop the flow, deport criminal aliens, broker a peace deal in the Middle East, provide the greatest investment in national defense in the history of our country, pull down the drain and the drive of our deficit and looming debt crisis in mandatory spending by rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse to the tune of about $1.5 trillion, constrain spending on the discretionary side, cut taxes, cut spending at historic levels, open up domestic energy production. We had lower interest, lower inflation, a growing economy, wages are up, people putting more money in their pockets before my Democrat colleagues shut the government down over a COVID-era fraud-ridden program to expand a failed underlying policy of Obamacare. That was the first shutdown before the shutdown that we're in today. We would have been at 2.5% plus growth. We were made a mockery and derided for putting that assumption in our big, beautiful bill. But that's exactly what CBO said where we'd be. Over the 10-year budget window, that's $1.5 trillion to reduce the deficit. So there is a reason that CBO, in their recent report, 6 months into this fiscal year, shows a 10% reduction in our deficit. It's been decades since we've seen that. 10% reduction in our deficit because of growth, because of rooting out waste and bending the curve on mandatory spending and controlling cost and cutting wasteful and unnecessary spending on the discretionary budget. And because President Trump decided to lead on the world stage with respect to trade and give our workers, manufacturers, and farmers a head-to-head fighting chance at trade deals. And the revenue helped shore up our balance sheet. So I'm pleased with what the president has done. I'm proud he's our commander-in-chief. I'm going to hear and think we'll hear a lot about a war of choice. Let me tell you something. It's a choice to play patty cake and have a policy of appeasement with a jihadist, genocidal, radical terrorist regime to the point that they are knocking on the door of having a nuclear weapon. And that is what we've seen, not just from our Democrat colleagues or Democrat presidents, but for almost 50 years. So yes, we choose to defend our country's interest and protect our homeland and the American people from serious and imminent threats. And I've said before, I pray to God that whether it's a Democrat or Republican in the Oval Office, when they get those briefings, they're willing to put politics and personal interests aside and do what's right for the country. It's not easy. It won't be easy. But it never is easy to do the right thing in this town, Russ. So thanks for being here. That's the context. I think this budget of yours shows directionally that we're going to continue to do that and double down on it, right? Reduce wasteful spending, invest in our defense, and continue to promote the growth that we so desperately need. And all boats will rise on that prosperity.